It is 3 o'clock in the morning and the silence of your home is absolute. The only light in the room comes from the 3 monitors on your desk, which cast a flickering blue glow against the walls. You are a geopolitical analyst, and for the last 6 months you have been tracking the rising temperature in the Middle East like a doctor watching a fever break. Your job is to see the invisible lines of connection between a drone strike in a desert and the price of milk in a supermarket 5,000 miles away. For months the rhetoric has been empty and the threats have been performative. But tonight the rhythm of the data changed. You reach for your cold coffee and stare at the Bloomberg terminal. A single red headline flashes across the screen, and then another, and then 100 more. Oil prices have just jumped 30% in 90 minutes. Gold is vertical. This is no longer a simulation, and it is no longer a forecast. You are watching the opening act of a war that the world has spent 40 years trying to avoid. The quiet of your office feels like a lie because you know that on the other side of the planet the sky is currently on fire. The breaking news arrives not as a single report but as a chaotic storm of information. You watch the live satellite feeds and the grainy social media uploads from the Persian Gulf. Missiles are being launched from mobile platforms in the Iranian desert, and the targets are not just military bases but the very infrastructure that keeps the global heart beating. You see reports of explosions near the port of Fujairah and emergency sirens wailing in Riyadh. Within minutes, the United States Department of Defense issues a brief and chilling statement confirming that a full-scale engagement is underway. In the financial capitals of London and New York, the markets are reacting with a violence that makes the 2008 crisis look like a minor correction. You watch as billions of dollars in valuation evaporate in seconds. This is the moment the world changes. The geopolitical friction that has been building for decades has finally reached the point of ignition, and as an analyst you are one of the few people who truly understands that the missiles are only the beginning of the damage. The global shockwave starts at the Strait of Hormuz. You zoom in on your digital map and stare at that tiny stretch of water which is only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. This is the jugular vein of the global economy. Around 20% of the world's total oil consumption passes through this choke point every single day. As an analyst, you know the math by heart. If a single tanker is hit, or if the strait is mined, the insurance premiums for shipping will skyrocket to the point where no captain will dare to enter. You see the immediate realization hitting the global markets. It is not just about the price of gasoline at the pump. It is about the entire global supply chain. If the oil stops flowing, the ships stop moving, and if the ships stop moving, the factories in Asia shut down, and the shelves in Europe go empty. You are watching a domino effect that could trigger a global economic heart attack within 72 hours. This conflict is no longer a regional dispute over borders or ideology. It is a fundamental threat to the way modern civilization functions. You pivot your focus to the strategic chessboard and begin to map out the players. The United States has massive carrier strike groups in the region, but they are navigating a nightmare of asymmetric warfare. Iran does not need to win a conventional naval battle. They only need to make the region unnavigable. You look at the positioning of the Iranian fast attack boats and their vast arsenal of anti-ship missiles hidden in coastal caves. Then there is Israel. You see the alerts coming in from Tel Aviv, and you know that their involvement turns a bilateral war into a regional conflagration. But the game is even bigger than that. You look at the data coming out of Moscow and Beijing. Russia benefits from the skyrocketing energy prices while China is the world's largest importer of oil and cannot afford a prolonged disruption. You realize that you are watching a global power game where the Middle East is just the board. Every move made in the Gulf is being countered by a move in the South China Sea or the plains of Eastern Europe. The world is splitting into 2 distinct blocks, and you are watching the cracks form in real time. The market panic is now reaching a fever pitch. On your second monitor, the stock market indices are a sea of deep red. Tech stocks are being liquidated as investors flee toward the only things that feel real in a time of war, which are gold and crude oil. You see the spread on government bonds widening as the world realizes the cost of this conflict will be measured in trillions of dollars of new debt. People are panicking because they understand that inflation is about to become a monster. If energy costs double overnight, the price of every single thing that is grown or manufactured will follow. You watch as the central banks of the world hold emergency meetings, but you know they are powerless. You cannot print more oil and you cannot lower interest rates to stop a missile. As an analyst, you feel a cold sense of clarity. The financial system is a house of cards built on the assumption of cheap energy and stable shipping routes, and both of those assumptions have just been incinerated. Now the escalation scenarios begin to play out on your screens. This is the part of the job that keeps you awake at night. It is not just about the kinetic war of bombs and bullets. You see the first signs of a massive cyber offensive. Power grids in major Western cities are experiencing unexplained brownouts. Banking apps are going offline. You realize that Iran and its proxies are taking the fight into the digital realm to strike at the heart of the civilian populations. They are trying to create enough internal chaos in the West to force a withdrawal. Meanwhile, on the ground, the proxy wars are igniting. You see reports of activity in Lebanon and Yemen and Iraq. The entire region is becoming a singular battlefield. The risk of a global recession is no longer a percentage point in a report, it is a certainty. You are looking at a scenario where the Strait of Hormuz remains closed for months rather than weeks. If that happens, the global economy will contract by a margin not seen since the Great Depression. The tension in the air is thick because everyone is waiting to see if the next step is the use of non-conventional weapons. As the sun begins to rise outside your office window, you reach a terrifying realization. This is not just another regional conflict in a long history of Middle Eastern instability. This is the moment the post-World War II order finally collapses. You see the shifts in geopolitical alliances happening right before your eyes. Countries that were once staunch allies of the West are now hedging their bets and looking toward the East for security and energy. The dominance of the US dollar is being challenged because the world is searching for a way to trade that doesn't rely on a system that can be shut down by a war in a single strait. You realize that the energy markets will never look the same after today. The transition to alternative fuels will be forced at a pace that will break many economies. The financial systems of the world are being rewired in the middle of a fire. You aren't just an analyst watching a war. You are a witness to the birth of a new and much more dangerous global era. You lean back in your chair and watch the first rays of light hit your desk. The world is waking up to the news and the panic is about to go mainstream. In a few hours, people will be lining up at gas stations and checking their retirement accounts with fear in their eyes. They will look for someone to blame and they will look for a quick solution, but you know there isn't one. A single conflict in one corner of the world has successfully reshaped the entire global economy. It has exposed the fragility of our interconnected world and the thinness of the ice we have been skating on for decades. The maps will be redrawn and the power dynamics will shift, but the costs will be paid by everyone from the billionaire in a penthouse to the farmer in a rural village. As you prepare to send your final report of the night, you realize that the most important lesson of this crisis is how small the world has become. A missile fired in the dark of night halfway across the globe has just reached out and touched every single person on Earth. The war might be happening over there, but the consequences are already home.